Hey guys, good Thursday afternoon, and thanks for checking out your latest long range forecast here. It is December 21st, and we're looking at the latest model guidance, the latest outlook here, the forecast for really as we're getting closer into the holiday. And then obviously, a lot of attention right now, in my opinion, turns to the first of the year. So, just to break that down for you, it's very mild the next really 10 days or so. I think there's a period of 10 days or so of cold and stormy weather that can accompany the central and eastern US. Attention turns to mid January for a rather significant mild period. And then late January into February, perhaps more of a sustained colder and stormier pattern might be in the docket. All right, so that's kind of the thought process right now. I'm going to run through the latest thinking with you on all this. Month to date temperature departures through the first 20 days of December. It's going to go down as probably the second warmest December of all time. Classic El Nino like behavior for the month. Really no surprise there. Temperatures from normal here for Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. Extraordinarily warm across the Great Lakes, eastern U.S. here, running anywhere from about 9 to 20 degrees above the average. Check out the high temperatures here on Christmas Eve, 60 degrees in Indianapolis. I'll tell you what here, it's as warm as, gosh, mid 60s here across the Carolinas and mid and upper 70s down across Florida for Christmas Eve. Christmas Day, we kind of continue to see that warmth spread east. You're in the 50s here in the mid-Atlantic, upper 40s into the north and east, 50s along the coast, upper 60s in the Carolinas. Just an extraordinarily mild pattern. Colder out in the central U.S. for sure. We take a look at snowfall potential here over the next 10 days, and again, there's not much to be seen. A couple of systems that are pretty sloppy that this map will probably dramatically change. There's a big system that wants to work through the area here, a big area of low pressure that wants to work through the area. Christmas Eve into Christmas Day that will impact a large portion of the central U.S. There will be a cold side to this storm, probably somewhere back out into the Midwest. A lot of wind and rain and just nasty weather here Christmas Day across the central portion of the country. In fact, you can see 10-day rainfall numbers from the morning guidance here. Pretty significant with that big storm here across the central portions of the country. And hit or miss totals there across the east up into the north and east with another system later in the period. All right. What we've got here are the ensembles this morning. Across the top is the 5 to 10 from the big three ensembles, the 10 to 15 on the bottom. You've got European on the left, okay, American in the middle, and you have the Canadian on the right. All right, so big feature in this period obviously is the Canadian ridge, okay? What happens is you can see this trough here in the 10 to 15, kind of goes away in Alaska. The Canadian ridge retrogrades, strong model agreement there in that happening. Where the models disagree and where there's some uncertainty from the Canadian is in the EPO region, as well as the European. The GEFS has a little bit more of a negative EPO than, say, the other two models do. The GEFS, I have noticed, I do not trust its North Pacific forecasts as much as I do the European. And honestly, the Canadian does a great job with the North Pacific weather forecast patterns here in the extended. Doesn't do great with a lot of things, but that is actually a strong point in that model, in my opinion, just watching it over the last 15 years or so. Regardless, in this period, okay, we're going to see a storm system come through that will be the catalyst to bring the colder temperatures into the area. And in this 10 to 15 day time frame is really where, as that ridge retrogrades and a big area of low pressure can deepen, we can see a bigger storm system that will slide through here in that 10 to 15 day period, probably right around the 5th through the 7th of January. There could be a big storm in that time frame. All right. Temperatures, the models are in generally a good agreement. You get the 5 to 10 across the top, European, American, and then at the bottom, they both really look the same. It's because really their tropical forcing forecasts are the same. I mean, the way they're handling the MJO is the same. There's really not huge differences right now in the modeling. So the confidence for a colder period developing around, say, the 29th or 31st or so through the, 8th or 9th of January, I think is a good time frame for cold and perhaps a storm or two that could be relatively impactful, big in size, central U.S. up into the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic. Okay, the day 15 clusters from the European and the American computer models have a couple of very interesting themes in mind. All right, the one thing is none of the clusters really keep the eastern U.S. super warm except for cluster 2 of the European. It has a warmer look out ahead of it. Cluster 3 and cluster 1 are very cold in the east. You can see there are a few select members that have a very cold blast of air here into day 15, which is around January 5th. And I think as we get through MJO3, that definitely indicates that a big blast of Arctic air will come behind a bigger storm there that first week of January. So the clusters are trying to talk to us a little bit. And again, the big uncertainty, the European has a bias with holding troughs down in the south and west. I don't think cluster 2 is correct. I think for day 15, January 5th, cluster 1, I think, is a great look here. GEFS as well. I really think that this is going to be a time frame where you have cluster 2, cluster 3, where I think we can be looking at a blast of Arctic air as we're in MJO3 and heading into 4. Okay, now here's the unfortunate part of that. After a 10-day period of cold and stormy, what looks to happen is that the MJO goes through phase 3, all right, and then into phase 4. And what happens, that really starts to get through. You can see the GEFS is around the 15th of December, but the European is faster around the 13th. I think we look at quicker solutions as we get closer to the time frame. High correlation significance level 2, phase 4 being very warm and very wet, no doubt about it. So we want to look at what do these look like in El Niños with positive global wind patterns is what we're anticipating. Phase 3 will deliver the Arctic blast. It will come through the negative EPO. The cold will start from the west and move east as the negative EPO is established. But as soon as it departs into 4, I believe mid-January, we'll say around the 10th through the 20th right now. You know, we're kind of throwing darts here. It goes back to a very warm period. All of January it's not going to be sustained cold. It's not going to be just all out winter cold and snowy pattern. Okay, that's the concern there with the MJO. And I know a lot of folks are like, well, Michael, there's a sudden stratospheric warming event, and yes, there is. You're right. Here's what I'm concerned with in that regard. We absolutely. We jab, we nudge, and we really bother the vortex. Okay, this warming event scoots it on over just east of Greenland. European, the GFS both suggest this, but what they don't do yet is they don't split it yet. Now, a displacement can lead to a couple things. It's very important you note that the PV is still intact here. It's still one piece. A displacement can deliver cold if there's Pacific blocking. Okay. In this particular instance, if the MJO goes into phase 4 and the vortex hasn't been split, it will get very warm. Period. It will just torch. There won't be Pacific blocking to create the cross-polar flow to shove the Arctic air available down into the eastern U.S. It won't. It can't happen. If in the coming days the warming event starts to the models start to get closer into the period where they might start saying, well, there could be a split. That would change that outlook. The problem is this is a volatile forecast that far out to note if the models can split the vortex or not. It's certainly going to warm it. There's a warming event going, but that doesn't guarantee cold air delivery into the U.S. unless it's displaced further down over the Great Lakes or it's split. Okay, the warming event is encouraging, but if the Pacific pattern is not cooperating, it will not deliver the cold. And the MJO is what brings that risk in play. That's the concern for MJO4, okay? Which we've talked about this for a minute. All right, we've talked about this for a while. Here's what I'm talking about: European Canadian ensembles. I don't like the Americans' skill level on the EPO forecast. It does go negative here. All right, there's no question that will deliver cold that first week of January. But look what happens. By the 6th, the EPO is back to positive on the European ensemble, and it's back to positive on the Canadian ensemble. In fact, you've got a decent signal there on the Canadian that EPO, the Pacific blocking pattern, starts to not cooperate. And so that mid-month warm-up in January, it's showing up on the American and the European weekly products. Okay, here's mid-month, January 13th through the 20th here on the left, European on the top. Okay, mild, CFS much more mild in that period. But watch, they do bring the cold back late January into February. They bring it back, and it could, that potential period, if the polar vortex cooperates, can be a colder, stormier period for a more prolonged time. Okay, that potential period has legs for that to last longer. These are our outlooks right now for January, February. We haven't messed with February since November. You can see the updated dates across the top. January can, the problem is it can start cold, get really mild, and end cold. So you try to average out the most of it. From a heating demand standpoint, we're forecasting below normal heating demand. February is the month we've always had being the coldest and the stormiest, with a forecast of above normal heating demand in that time frame. So that's the latest analysis right now. It's important to note that this comes with risk here. This MJO cold delivery, that because it's going through the circle, just so you guys know, that's the only reason why we could have any cold coming. If we weren't going MJO right now, if we didn't have an active pulse, we would absolutely be record warmth out through January. So that's helping deliver some cold from the Pacific blocking, creating a little bit of a cross-polar flow for a time. But the risk is it runs back in through the milder phases for a time. We've got to have the polar vortex cooperate. The sudden stratospheric warming event pushes the vortex east of Greenland, and we don't get back into a favorable state in the tropical forcing for Pacific blocking, we're going to have a really tough time getting any cold air delivery late January to February. So that's not a guarantee. That's the reality of the analysis right now. So, audit who you follow, okay? Audit who you follow, audit what they're saying. Folks posting day 15 GFS maps and calling for the coldest, stormiest, craziest winter you've ever seen after December 30th, that's not reality. I mean, listen, if it was, I'd be saying it, okay? But that's not reality, and you got to look at where we are and where we've been, and look at how much this has been pushed back and pushed back. So we'll keep you posted. Thanks for following along with us. You guys have a great rest of your week.